What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, and this is my prediction video for the third round of the 2013 NHL Stanley Cup playoffs. Eastern and Western Conference Championship Series have now been set. In the Eastern Conference, we've got the number 1 ranked Pittsburgh Penguins taking on the number 4 ranked Boston Bruins, and in the Western Conference, we have the number 1 ranked and President's Trophy winning Chicago BlackHawks taking on the defending Stanley Cup champions, number 5 ranked Los Angeles Kings. Now, it's been made a huge deal of in the sports news media that these 4 teams that are remaining are the last 4 Stanley Cup champions, and that is very true. While there is a lot of parity in the NHL and any team can beat any other team on any given night, the cream of the crop in terms of these winning franchises really does rise to the top in the National Hockey League, and I firmly believe we have 4 of the absolute best franchises in the National Hockey League representing the Eastern and Western Conferences. We're going to start in the Eastern Conference one more time, where the number 1 ranked Pittsburgh Penguins are taking on the number 4 ranked Boston Bruins. As far as regular season records go, once again, Pittsburgh was 36-12 in the regular season for 72 points to win the Eastern Conference. Boston was 28-14-6 for 62 points, just missing out on the Northeast Division Championship by 1 point to Montreal. Playoff records so far, Pittsburgh is 8-3 in these playoffs, outscoring their opponents 47-28. Boston, one worse, is only 8-4 in these playoffs, outscoring their opponents 38-28. Season series between these two teams saw Pittsburgh win all 3 games. Pittsburgh also outscored Boston 8-5 in those 3 games, but Boston holds the edge in shots 88-76. What's notable about these games in this season series, every single game was a 1-goal game, but none of them went to overtime or a shootout. So these are 2 teams that fight tooth and nail. It is a dogfight. It ends in regulation. Somebody gets the finish, but this is 2 teams that are really matched up well against each other. Home versus away advantage for the Penguins. Penguins are 23-7, playoffs included, at home this year, versus Boston, who is only, playoffs included, 15-14 on the road. This I see as a major advantage for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Home versus away advantage for the Boston Bruins. Boston is 21-10 this year, playoffs included at home, but Pittsburgh is 21-8 in terms of playing games on the road. To be perfectly honest, I see this as a push. I know Pittsburgh has won their 21 games in fewer overall games than Boston has, but to me this is a push. Pittsburgh's a very good away team. Boston is a tremendously good home team. So while Pittsburgh definitely has a major advantage when they're in Pittsburgh, when they're in Boston, I really see it as a push. Offense versus defense. So far this year, Pittsburgh has scored 212 goals while only surrendering 147. Boston has scored 169 while surrendering 137. Naturalized head-to-head, I see this as a 175-158 advantage for the Pittsburgh Penguins, which is an average of about .354 extra goals per game against Boston's defense. X factors for Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh hasn't really faced a ton of adversity in these playoffs, especially since they made the transition from Marc-Andre Fleury to Thomas Vokoun. How are they going to react when this Boston Bruins team that is gritty and physical, how is Pittsburgh going to react when Boston takes them into deep waters? Also worth noting, the Penguins are just 1-2 in these playoffs when an opponent scores 4 goals or more. Boston has scored 4 goals or more 5 times in these playoffs. So if that happens once or twice in this series, if they can start getting to Vokoun, maybe start putting a little bit of doubt in that 37, 38-year-old brain, how is Pittsburgh going to respond to that? Because again, they haven't really been put into a ton of adversity, really haven't been drug into deep waters, certainly again since they made the switch to Vokoun. So I have to wonder how Pittsburgh is going to react to being drug into deep waters, and how they end up reacting, I think, will ultimately help decide this series. X factors for the Bruins. Working on stopping a team that at times looks like they have 3 scoring lines. They just have so much depth in Pittsburgh. It's crazy. In my eyes, the defensemen have to stay back out of the offensive play, and if they do that, Boston is going to be sacrificing 3 of their top 10 scorers in these playoffs, which come on their back end. And that Boston fourth line, which we talked about in the reaction video, Campbell, Paille, and Thornton, cannot cool down. If this line stops producing at some point in these playoffs, Boston is done. In what I think is going to be a tight series, it's going to be a little bit of back and forth here. I honestly just think Pittsburgh's too good. I think they've got way too much depth just from top to bottom on their team. I just think they're a much better team. So I'm going to go with the Pittsburgh Penguins. And just looking at the way that Pittsburgh plays at home, to be perfectly honest, I'm going to take Pittsburgh in 5 games. And I feel like I'm doing Boston a disservice there. But just with the way that Pittsburgh has played, especially at home in these playoffs, I have to take it. I think Pitt wins games 1 and 2 in Pittsburgh. I think they go back to Boston and they split games 3 and 4. Boston probably winning game 3, getting that boost from being back on home ice. And then I think Pittsburgh puts it away in game 5. So we'll give it to Pittsburgh in 5 games to win the Eastern Conference Championship and go back to the Stanley Cup Finals. Now, Pittsburgh's going to get a little bit of extra rest here because I do think the Western Conference Finals are going to go a little bit longer than the East will. In the Western Conference, of course, we have the number 1 ranked President's Trophy winning Chicago BlackHawks taking on the former Stanley Cup champions, or defending Stanley Cup champions, I should say, Los Angeles Kings. Regular season records, of course, one more time. Chicago was 36-7-5 for 77 points to win the President's Trophy. Los Angeles was 27-16-5 for 59 points. Playoff records so far, Chicago is 8-4, outscoring their opponents 33-22. Los Angeles is one worse at 8-5, outscoring their opponents 26-20. Season series between these two teams, Chicago was 2-1-0 in the season series here. Chicago outscoring Los Angeles 12-9 in terms of goals, and shots in the series were actually tied 84-84 in those 3 games, which is not something you see all that often, but I just thought was kind of cool. Home versus away advantage for the Blackhawks. The Blackhawks, playoffs included, are 24-7 at home this year. And of course, we talked about how abysmal the Kings have been on the road this year. Chalk up 3 more road losses from the previous series. They are only 9-21 on the road this year. This is as major an advantage for the Chicago Blackhawks as you can possibly come up with. Home versus away advantage for Los Angeles. Los Angeles is 26-5 so far this season, playoffs included, at home, and they haven't lost at home in God knows how long. It's been quite a while. But on the road, Chicago has been 20-9 so far this year, so it is still an advantage for the Kings. I'll call it a significant advantage. I'm not willing to call it a major advantage because just the numbers there don't quite add up to me to call it a major advantage. Offense versus defense. The Chicago Blackhawks have put up 188 goals on the year while surrendering only 124, where the Los Angeles Kings have scored 159 but have surrendered 138. Naturalized head-to-head, I see this as a 163-142 advantage for the Chicago Blackhawks, or a clip of about .44 extra goals per game. X factors for the Chicago Blackhawks. Chicago cannot afford to slump again the way that they did against Detroit. It almost cost them. It almost cost them that series, and by all rights it probably should have cost them that series, but it will cost them the series against Los Angeles if their goal scorers decide to disappear again and Crawford can't hold the fort. I think the big thing for Chicago here is traffic and the mental game with Jonathan Quick. If you're going to beat Quick, you got to get in his head, you got to frustrate him, and you cannot let him get clean, easy, open looks at the puck. He has to have no idea where that puck is coming from, and I know that's easier said than done with Quick because he gets so low to the ice that it's very hard to block what he's seeing. But Chicago is going to need a lot of traffic in front of Quick. They're going to have to play the mental game with him, maybe spill him a couple times behind the net if they get the opportunity. Get in his head and frustrate him because that's the only way that you're going to be beating Jonathan Quick on a consistent basis. X factors for the Kings. The Kings are only 1-5 on the road in these playoffs, whereas Chicago is 6-1 at home, and that is a huge determinant because in this series, Los Angeles is not going to have the luxury of a Game 7 at home should the series go that far. The Kings, however, are 7-0 when they score at least 2 goals. So that defensive system and that goaltending are holding up very, very well, and they need to keep that up. So if you pocket that second goal and you're the LA Kings, chances are you got to be feeling really good about your ability to win the game. I think through the first 5 games, this is going to be a home team series one more time. I think Chicago wins games 1 and 2 in Chicago. I think Los Angeles wins games 3 and 4 in Los Angeles. Chicago, they come back and Chicago wins game 5, but I think finally they get to quick. I think finally the Kings run out of gas, and I think finally the Chicago BlackHawks dispatch of the Los Angeles Kings in game 6 in Los Angeles. So my official prediction is the Chicago Blackhawks to beat the Los Angeles Kings in 6 games. So that's it, ladies and gentlemen. I am predicting, and you heard it here, probably not first, but you're hearing it here again, the number 1 ranked teams from the Eastern and Western conferences will face off. Officially, I have the Pittsburgh Penguins beating the Boston Bruins in 5 games in the Eastern Conference, and officially in the Western Conference, I have the Chicago Blackhawks beating the number 5 ranked Los Angeles Kings to knock them away from defending their Stanley Cup championship in 6 games. That's the predictions. I want to hear your predictions in the comments section below. One more time, big ups to my Halifax Mooseheads, Memorial Cup champions for the first time in franchise history. That's it for me, Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, and remember one more thing. In the comments section below on this video and the reaction video, I want you to tell me who your Conn Smythe Trophy winner is so far from the first 2 rounds in the playoffs. Enjoy the games of these 2 series. I'll be back with my reaction video and predictions for the Stanley Cup Championship Finals.